Just hours after a former Minneapolis officer was arrested, hundreds of protesters marched through downtown San Jose, shutting down Highway 101 near Santa Clara Street, demanding justice for George Floyd. Now, Chopper 5 was over the scene as demonstrators flooded the freeway. And right when the protesters took over the freeway, a car started smoking its tires, which got the protesters excited. It started sending up a lot of smoke, and this was right before the CHP shut down the freeway. As you can see there from these coverage from Live Chopper 5 showing us what happened. And KPIX 5's Len Ramirez joining us live from San Jose, where the protests are getting a little bit bigger along City Hall, but actually have stopped along the highway area. Len.
Yeah, Juliet, we just got moved back a little bit by the police department. This is where there was a confrontation just a few minutes ago between hundreds of protesters and the San Jose Police Department. The protesters basically started at City Hall about a quarter of a mile to a mile down Santa Clara Street that way. And so they marched around the downtown area and then headed in this direction. They came all the way up Santa Clara Street and then got onto the freeway. We can show you, if you pan left, Vince, we can show the freeway entrance that they just marched onto the freeway right there where it says Freeway Entrance 101. And they walked down the ramp where you can see the cars moving right now. And they walked onto the freeway. There was cars that were going by at freeway speed. You know, we're talking in 65, 70 miles per hour, and slowly but surely the drivers saw what was happening. They slowed down, and the protesters took over the freeway, and they stayed that way for over an hour. Traffic was backing up for miles back on Highway 101. At some point, the police department from San Jose came on scene with a show of force. They parked their cars, and dozens of these riot-geared police officers started getting out. At that point, the freeway protesters started dispersing. They went up the ramp towards Alum Rock Avenue and Santa Clara Street, and there they stayed for another hour or so. There was some pushing and shoving going on. A lot of the protesters were right up in the faces of the officers, but the officers showed tremendous restraint. They were pushing back, but they weren't really beating down anybody, which is a big difference that would have really incited the crowds. They were just kind of pushing back, kind of defending their own space, but not getting too pushy against the protesters. So the protesters then kind of moved their way back, and then the crowd eventually dispersed and went back towards City Hall. Now, we're not able to show you exactly from our vantage point what they're doing in the City Hall area, but we understand they have retaken the street, Santa Clara Street, in front of the City Hall area, and are maybe continuing their protests there. But as for right here, the San Jose Police Department has things very much under control. There was no violence against any individuals. There was some vandalism of police cars. I think 4 or 5 police cars had their back windows broken by protesters who were throwing rocks, large rocks, into the windows, breaking them. A couple of the patrol cars were also spray painted with graffiti, some anti-police messages, things like that. But by and large, this thing ended a lot more peacefully than it could have given. Juliet?
Absolutely. And Len, obviously you've covered many of these protests before in the past, but it seemed like this actually disseminated pretty quickly. And for you covering it on the ground, you didn't get in any harm's way either. It didn't seem like anyone was trying to get in our cameras or come visibly close to you as well.
No, fortunately, we were not targeted in any way. There were some firecrackers that were going off while we were on the freeway, and things got a little dicey. You did mention at the top that there was a little bit of violence against a driver. A guy driving a Mustang was trying to get home from work. He tried to squeeze through, and he said that he thought the protesters were going to let him through. But then he got into a confrontation with one of them, and they ended up stealing his cell phone. He got out. There was a confrontation. He got punched in the face, the driver did, and the protester then broke his rear window with a skateboard. And so that man pulled off on the side. He was bloodied up a little bit, but nothing too serious. And that's about the only violence that we've seen out here in San Jose today, despite the hundreds of people who are here and the very fever pitch that things were at for quite a while.
All right, Len
all right,
Mears, thanks so much. Alan.
Yeah, Len, thanks. Now we're looking at live chopper 5, and for some reason the crowd that had gathered in the middle of the street, there's a line of police there. Something has caused that crowd to start running in the opposite direction. Whether they're helping one of the protesters or something is, I can't tell exactly what they're
Yeah, it looks as if
pulling
they're
on
actually helping someone maybe walk to the side. Maybe there's a medical emergency or something to that extent. But there was a large group of protesters gathered right there. And then all of a sudden, as you were saying, they just kind of bolted
took
to
off
the
in
side.
the other
They took
way,
off.
like something's, frightened them considerably.
Right.
We don't have audio. We can't tell what the sound was there, but something happened. And as you said, they were apparently helping one of the other demonstrators off to the side, but we don't know how serious that is, obviously.
Right, and you can see the police officers are lined there, kind of giving appropriate distance from the protesters, and now it looks like they're kind of coming back into the street area. I believe this is Santa Clara Street, and they've been kind of spilling into the roadway there in the past 45 minutes or so.
Yep, because they had gone from Len's position there at 101 and where Alum Rock and Santa Clara meet at 101, then they took Santa Clara back towards City Hall. And we saw them, Juliet, we saw them gathering in the big courtyard, the big area out in front of City Hall, sort of regrouping. We didn't know if they had a plan to stay there, but obviously they didn't. They moved back out into the street and then moved back towards the line of police officers and scattered there, running the other direction. And now we see them sort of regathering, but yet there's still a lot of folks who are, for some reason or another, well, they seem to be moving back up to get into the sort of in the face of the police officers who are advancing towards the crowd. Whether they're going to try to push them back, we don't know. But that appears to be what might be happening right now.
Yeah, it looks like a vehicle's trying to get through. If that does not look like it's law enforcement, I can't really tell from my vantage point, but it looks like a car's trying to get through. And then you also have police that are blocking the roadway there as well, kind of keeping appropriate distance. But now it looks like everyone's kind of scattered all about. It
does, and they just keep, running across the street to the other side and regathering and dispersing. And, if that is a private vehicle there, that's not, that is not where you want to be. We saw it all the way back to L.A. and the Rodney King, riots. And being in a vehicle trapped in a crowd like that is an uncomfortable position because the crowd sort of takes over the street, and that's what we saw them do. They weren't in the street by City Hall like this, but then they started to move away from City Hall, and this is where we see them now, and that hopefully that SUV can move off to the side and get to safety.
Yeah, absolutely.
And somebody appears to be just either lying in the street there.
It looks like it might just be kind of a pylon or a cone that's right there. Yes, okay. Just kind of panning in and looking. And I can tell you, earlier there was some violence and there were some things that did erupt, but mainly it looked like this, just protesters out in the middle of the street kind of blocking traffic. But we're seeing them running now, and hopefully it doesn't get unruly to some extent. But it looks like the officers are kind of staying put in one place, not as to run after anything that might be going on violent in any way.
No, I see what you're talking about. There's the orange cones, and then there's sort of a barricade sign, sandwich board sign, if you will, out in the middle of the road. And certainly traffic has been blocked in the downtown area on Santa Clara as well as the side streets for quite some time. The protest originally, the demonstration started, the marchers began at about 3 o'clock at City Hall. But again, we pointed out that big truck that was on 101. There it is again, Juliet. That does appear, as Len said, to be part of the group that's protesting, or at least it's moving with them in sympathy, if you will.
Right. And some have their hands held up high, yeah, and you can see some of the officers
setting off smoke.
Right, just to create obviously some sort of a distance. And as Len was saying earlier, there was a lot of give and take with the police and the protesters. The protesters were doing what they're allowed to do to some extent, and the police department was just trying to make sure that things didn't get out of control. And that's the line that they're trying to keep going, you know, throughout the evening if it goes on.
And it is kind of 2 steps up, and then they take a few steps back. Officers, it's sort of a fluid back and forth, but demonstrators there, obviously, with their hands up symbolically. And the police have not moved towards them, but they're not giving up any ground either.
Yeah, that's right. You know, and as the CHP officer was telling us earlier, John Franzen, he was saying that, you know, all of the law enforcement, they were prepared for something to happen today, that there was planned protests. They knew that there would be people out on the streets, and they were prepared to keep things peaceful as long as they could. And Len even, you know, said to that as well, that that's kind of what it looked like. The police officers were really holding back until, you know, they need to do something in, you know, in terms of safety.
Well, it appears they're firing off some non-lethal type of charge, type of a weapon, because as soon as we see that puff of smoke, the crowd backs up, whether it's a projectile or it's a you know, concussion, you know, type of weapon or grenade.
Right.
It's definitely causing the crowd to back up, but doesn't last.
And we should mention that this isn't only going to be happening in San Jose. Obviously, this is happening throughout the country. There are peaceful protests going on, and there are riots going on in certain areas, unfortunately. But there is a statement that everyone is universally trying to make. And so San Jose may not be alone in terms of the protests that will be happening. There's some planned in Alameda County later this evening, and law enforcement and city officials there calling for no violence or destruction. And in this particular case, you know, if people can protest and be out there peacefully, then that's what may happen in other parts as well, without, you know, any significant violence.
Yeah, and at this point, you know, I know Len Ramirez was down by Highway 101. I'm sure he's repositioning, or another crew is at this point, because what we seem to have here is the crowd isn't moving, the police aren't moving, and it becomes, you know, I don't want to say standoff, but that's essentially it. It's a test of patience, you know, to see what's going to happen next, and hopefully nothing escalates.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was just looking from Chopper 5, and in this crowd, well, you can see that they've kind of skirted off into another one of the streets in downtown San Jose. Doesn't look like there's a traffic being blocked. Maybe traffic's kind of being diverted to other areas. But this group hasn't gotten bigger, and it hasn't really gotten smaller. It's kind of stayed the same, and they're just kind of staying put. And as the officers kind of move closer, it looks like, as you can see, the protesters are moving back. They're trying to keep some visible distance between the two, and hopefully that's how it will stay.
Oh, now we're getting into a confrontation.
Yeah.
They walked right up to police, and
Yeah.
they responded. And yeah, this is what people did not want to see happen. It appears that it's just the one demonstrator who either had enough, or police had been moving toward, demonstrators had been moving towards police, and they were firing off some sort of a non-lethal charge, and that may have been what did it.
Right. They were firing off non-lethal charge, and then also, actually, as I'm re-looking at some of the video, it was one of the protesters had a video camera kind of put it right in the officer's face. And then I don't know if he started to take a swing at the officer, and then the officer had to protect, or vice versa. But then you see 4 of the officers kind of pounce onto him, and obviously he'll be taken into custody. And it looked like it was just one account, one person doing that. I was kind of re-watching some video here.
Well, it's obviously gotten very tense, much more so than we even saw down when they were blocking the traffic on 101. This line there at the crosswalk, line in the sand, if you will, in the crosswalk, is where it's taking place. And demonstrators pushing, police pushing back, demonstrators pushing back, and now we see some trying to sort of infiltrate the line of officers as they come forward. Basically, as you pointed out, Juliet, sort of one by one.
Yeah. Also, Mayor Sam Liccardo releasing a statement in response to the protests currently happening, saying San Jose following the death of George Floyd. Mayor Liccardo has issued this statement. Quote, anger and peaceful protest will always be appropriate responses to injustice. Violence will never be. San Jose is united in outrage over the atrocious crime committed in Minneapolis and in sadness over George Floyd's horrible death. SJPD will take a measured approach in facilitating peaceful protest, but there will be no tolerance of violence to our people or damage to our city.
Well, clearly we saw the demonstrator come up to the police officer, and the officer responded, and but no other demonstrators followed that.
Right, it looked like it was just one, and as you were seeing, police were firing some sort of chemical dispersant into the crowd, causing people to scatter at times and then be kind of grouped together, and at least one protester went down and had to be pulled to their feet by fellow demonstrators as well. And then we saw this latest incident where one of the officers took down one of the protesters, and other officers had to join in.
Well, and they keep firing off. We see the puffs of smoke. They keep firing off those weapons, and protesters, demonstrators moving back. But then they don't stay. They don't disperse. So again, it's really going to be a matter of time will tell. An overused phrase, I know, but that's what it's going to have to be. As things escalated a bit, how are they going to de-escalate? How's this going to wind down, if you will, because tensions are high. People's tempers are flaring right now. You can see it in that one demonstrator as we look live from Chopper 5. There are things to be said. They want to be heard, you know, but that one demonstrator crossed the line and you know, was taken down by police officers.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing that all officers trying to, you know, when they're going through training is to de-escalate. And that's what Mayor Liccardo was saying too, in terms of what they've been doing in San Jose and in Santa Clara County as a whole, is de-escalate. And when it comes to situations like this, you know, police officers can hold their stance and hold their ground and let protesters do what they need to do. But as you said, when one person crosses the line, they have to do something, you know, to prevent any further violence.
And it is hard on both sides. It's hard. It's human emotion. You know, you get charged up on both sides. How do you bring that down? And you know, once had an officer. I asked him, "How do you gear up for this sort of thing?" And he said, "It's not gearing up. You have to gear down. You have to gear yourself down because, you know, as I say, it's adrenaline. It's human nature. But they're hopefully trained to do this. I know they are trained, but hopefully they can hold it here, and the demonstrators as well, that there's a point to be made, there's a message to be heard, and they can get that point across. They have the First Amendment right to do that, and they're doing it.
That's right. I mean, the clear statement in all of this is that they're not tolerating this, and it's a universal statement that we're going to be seeing beyond today, for sure, and how police react to it. And obviously, they're doing what they can to de-escalate and make sure that things don't get out of hand, because they know that things are tense right now, that the public eye is watching, and there are cameras, and there's video, and there are protesters who are going to try to taunt them. And they're training, as you say, you go into an event kind of not hyped up, but you go in calm and you know that you've got a job to do. And unfortunately, the example we saw in Minneapolis just sets the tone, and such a bad example for the rest of law enforcement that's trying to visibly do their job.
Well, they appear to be building up with more officers there on motorcycles behind this line of police officers standing across the street just in front of that intersection. It was just a handful of demonstrators, 2, 3, 4, 6. Now more and more are coming in, whether they're the demonstrators or witnesses with everybody has their cell phone out. They're all recording this. Hands are up. People are standing their ground, if you will. Now it'll be up to the officers, I suppose, to decide, do we move forward? Do they stand it there? You see the motorcycle officers at the bottom of the screen. They have assembled. I'm sure there are more behind them as well.
Well, and it's not that they are outnumbered. You know, I mean, this is not a huge gathering that we've seen in the past for protests, and you know, they're scattered a little bit here and there. So maybe they plan to stay well into the night, but if it stays like this, they have every right to do that, and the officers just stand guard like they're trained to do as well. And you just hope that it doesn't escalate in any ways of violence.
Absolutely. And other than the incident that Len described with one of the drivers and one of the demonstrators on Highway 101, and then what we witnessed here at this intersection, one of the demonstrators approaching the police officers, it seemed to be a very animated verbal thing first, and then he stepped in, and I'd have to review it, but I don't know if he attacked or said the wrong thing or got too close or took a swing, but there was something there that escalated into an altercation.
Yeah, I think when you said earlier cross the line, when I was rewatching it, it just looked like, you know, he had his camera out and he stepped way too close, a couple of inches away from the officer's face, whether they were taunting or he was taunting the officer, and I'm not sure what happened at that point, but it was kind of like, all right, look, you crossed the line and we've got to do something here. But law enforcement throughout the Bay Area, throughout the country, have been preparing for what could happen and what's to happen. And so, and it's not like anyone was caught off guard that there were going to be protests today. It was supposed to start peacefully at City Hall at noon. It did. It continued on into a march. It went on to Highway 101, shutting off the highway there for some time, and then spilling onto the side roads, as you can see. And here's where we have it now. And so other counties are preparing for obviously other things as well. I'm trying to see some of the activity. It looks like there's a shopping cart in the middle there.
Right in the middle of the intersection?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's throwing it. You know, you're going to get some that are going to take it a little bit too far. But does that entitle police to step in? I don't know.
Well, and it's, you know, you and I have each covered our share of protests in the Bay Area, you know, the home of free speech in Berkeley, and, you know, it's carried on. That tradition continues. And, you know, I think what I'm hearing from at least the elected officials is that, look, you have a right to do it. You have a right to do it peacefully. You have a right to say what you want to say and be heard. But when it comes to it escalating into violence, you don't have a right to do it that way.
You know, just from doing some interviews and out in the public, and I know that you experience this too, Alan, even when you look at social media, I find the comments, there's anger and there's rage, but there's also this raw emotion of just utter sadness of how could this happen? How could even law enforcement stand by and watch a fellow officer take someone down, you know, in such a way that that caused his life, took his life. And all age groups are reacting. I see that on social media. And so it's a universal emotion right now. And so I think when you look at protests, what group started this, who's out there, I think it's just a mix of a lot of people, and you're going to see that throughout.
Well, let's find out. I think Maria Medina, KPIX 5 reporter, on the line with us. Maria, can you hear me?
I can, yeah, Alan.
So you're
Good
downtown.
afternoon.
Where exactly are you?
So we were dispatched to assign, obviously, the protest that's going on here in San Jose, downtown San Jose. We were approaching downtown towards City Hall, and we could see the crowd down Santa Clara Street, but we wanted to find a safe place to park. And on our way there, you know, we saw various places that were spray painted, a live truck, the buildings, and then one side of City Hall almost completely covered by graffiti. And, you know, we're waiting to get through the light through an intersection, and somebody actually came up from behind our truck and started spray painting our own live truck. So that is the feeling and the environment right now, the climate that we're in right now. We don't feel safe even to leave our truck. My photographer has suggested going outside with his cell phone, but just the feeling of being separated and not knowing, because we're in a live truck and because it looks like people are targeting our live trucks here, you know, there is an unsettling feeling of what can happen if we go into these crowds. So I just wanted to give you guys an idea and a feel of what the climate is right now. It looks like, you know, things were pretty peaceful in the beginning. I was watching the coverage from home a couple hours ago. Things were pretty peaceful in the beginning, but it looks like it's starting to ramp up here as far as the emotion and the intensity. So just, you know, we're on the side of the road now, staying far away in our live truck because we feel as if that's the safe thing to do right now. And just from where we're at, something just happened here in front of me on Santa Clara Street. We're seeing crowds here kind of running back and forth. So we don't know what's happening. Some of our coworkers are telling us who have vantage points from up above. They're saying that there's some scrimmages in the street. So we're not getting that close to see exactly what's going on, but we're seeing people running back and forth as if they're running from something or someone, and things are escalating.